She walked into the most dangerous room in the castle. No woman had ever entered the Alpha's private room alone. It was forbidden, deadly. But Eowyn had no choice. Her pack was about to be attacked. She was the only one who knew when and how. And Alpha Vaelin had been locked away for 3 days because his wolf was out of control. Her hands shook as she opened his door. Inside, she found him standing by the window, tall, powerful, and barely holding on to his human side. "You need to leave," he growled. "Now." But when their eyes met, something impossible happened. Her wolf, the one that had never worked, suddenly woke up. His wolf stopped fighting and went completely still. They both felt it. The pull, the connection, the thing that was supposed to be just stories. In that moment, everything changed. Her quiet life was over. And she had no idea what came next. Chapter 1. The gathering stormblood hit her nose first. Thick, metallic, wrong. Eowyn Thorne crouched behind the massive oak, her heart slamming against her ribs like a caged animal desperate to escape. 3 enemy packs spread across the clearing below, their warriors moving with deadly precision that shouldn't exist between rival territories. Shadow Ridge falls at dawn. Alpha Caius Thornfield's voice carried on the wind, cold as winter steel. No survivors, no mercy. The words struck her like physical blows. Meanwhile, back home, her own Alpha raged in isolation while his wolf tore him apart from the inside. Without warning, something stirred deep in her chest, a flutter of awareness she'd never felt before. Her wolf. But that was impossible. What followed was the most terrifying sight of her 25 years, pack after pack emerging from the tree line. Hundreds of warriors, all focused on one target, her home. "The Shadow Ridge Alpha won't last another day," Caius continued, amber eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "His wolf devours his sanity while we speak. Perfect. Timing." Deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't random. Someone had orchestrated this moment when their Alpha was most vulnerable. Yet even as terror clawed at her throat, that strange stirring intensified. Her dormant wolf pressed forward, sensing danger, sensing more. Before she could move, a twig snapped beneath her boot. Silence crashed over the forest like a physical weight. Every head turned toward her hiding spot. In that moment, 3 realizations hit her simultaneously. She was completely surrounded. Dawn was less than 4 hours away, and Alpha Vaelin Blackwood was their only hope for survival. Her body moved on instinct. Run, now, before they— "There!" Caius roared. "Kill the spy!" Because of that single sound, everything changed. As enemy howls erupted behind her and branches whipped past her face, she felt it clear as day. Her wolf wasn't dormant. It was awakening, and it wanted blood. Chapter 2. The Alpha's Rage. The ancient fortress of Shadow Ridge trembled as another roar shook its foundations, a sound that made grown warriors flee in terror. Alpha Vaelin Blackwood's wolf had been fighting for control for 3 days straight, and his human side was losing ground with each passing hour. Not only that, but the pack could feel their leader's instability through the bond, a constant thrum of barely contained violence. "Stand back!" Beta Marcus shouted as massive oak doors splintered under the force of Vaelin's fury. "Nobody approaches that chamber!" What's worse, every wolf in the territory sensed the danger radiating from their Alpha's private domain. Truth be told, Marcus had never witnessed anything like it in 30 years of loyal service. Still, he held his position outside the forbidden chamber, while his Alpha's agonized howls echoed through stone corridors that had stood for centuries. Behind those reinforced doors, Vaelin fought a battle no one could help him win. His wolf, massive, silver-black, utterly feral, clawed at his consciousness with increasing desperation. The beast wanted something, needed something with primal urgency. But what? Between one breath and the next, another wave of rage crashed through him. Vaelin's human form flickered as bones began to crack and reshape, before he wrestled control back with a snarl that shook dust from ancient rafters. "Find her!" his wolf demanded, the voice thundering through his mind like an avalanche. "She's close. So close I can taste her fear." Find who? Valen had no idea what his wolf sensed, yet the animal's certainty was absolute. Someone was out there. Someone vital. The scent hit him then, faint but unmistakable. Female. Pack. And something else that made his wolf go completely still with recognition. As the wind shifted outside his chamber windows, Valen's eyes snapped open, blazing gold, predatory, hungry. His wolf had found what it was searching for. She was coming home, and everything was about to change. Chapter 3. Forbidden Intelligence. Eloan's lungs burned like molten fire as she sprinted through the forest, enemy howls growing fainter behind her with each desperate stride. By the time she reached Shatteridge's borders, dawn was only 3 hours away. 3 hours to convince anyone, that their entire world was about to end in blood and flame. Yet as she approached the fortress gates, Beta Marcus stepped into her path with grim determination etched across his weathered features. "No one sees the Alpha," he stated with absolute finality. "Direct orders. He's too dangerous right now." "Marcus, listen to me." Eloan fought to catch her breath, her intelligence training kicking in despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. 3 packs are moving against us. Caius Thornfield leads them, and they know about Valen's condition. The Beta's expression darkened like storm clouds gathering. Because of that revelation, everything she'd witnessed suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. "How many warriors?" he asked quietly. "Hundreds. Maybe more." Her voice trembled despite every effort to remain calm. "They're counting on our Alpha being incapacitated. That's exactly why they chose tonight." More importantly, she'd seen something else in Caius's predatory gaze, a hunger that went far beyond simple territorial conquest. This felt deeply personal. Even so, Marcus shook his head with reluctant determination. "I can't let you near him, Eloan. Last night, he nearly shattered the reinforced doors. If his wolf breaks free completely, then we're all dead anyway." The words exploded from her before she could stop them. "Don't you understand? They're not coming to defeat us. They're coming to eliminate every last member of this pack." As if summoned by her desperation, another earth-shaking roar echoed from the Alpha's tower. In the echo of his voice, something deep inside Eloan responded, a flutter of recognition that made her newly awakened wolf stir restlessly. "I have to try," she whispered, already knowing Marcus wouldn't approve her desperate plan. "I'm the only one who knows their battle formations, their timing, their weaknesses." Without another word, she melted back into familiar shadows, using every skill her father had taught her about moving unseen through the fortress corridors. The Alpha's chamber was 4 floors up. Her wolf urged her forward with increasing intensity. Time was running out faster than spilled blood. Chapter 4. The Impossible Choice. The fortress corridors stretched before Eloan like stone arteries leading to the heart of danger itself. Guards patrolled the lower levels with nervous energy, but years of intelligence work had taught her every shadow, every blind spot in Shatteridge's ancient defenses. What followed was a careful dance between memory and instinct as she climbed toward the Alpha's forbidden domain. On the other hand, every fiber of her being screamed that this was pure madness. Unmated females didn't enter an Alpha's private chambers. Ever. The law was absolute, carved in stone by their ancestors' blood and sacrifice. Still, the enemy army was less than 2 hours away from their gates. Her wolf pressed forward with each step, growing stronger and more insistent with every floor she climbed. Something was fundamentally wrong with that picture. Healers had declared her defective since puberty, unable to shift, barely registering pack bonds. So why was it stirring now with such fierce determination? Despite that mystery, she had more pressing concerns demanding her attention. At the 3rd floor landing, she paused to listen carefully. No footsteps, no voices, just the continuous sound of destruction echoing from above. Moments later, she reached the final staircase, the one leading directly to Valen's private sanctuary. Ancient runes carved deep into stone seemed to pulse with ominous warning in the flickering torchlight. "Turn back," they whispered like ghostly voices. "This path leads to ruin and damnation." But then another sound reached her ears through the heavy doors. Not rage this time. Something far more devastating. Pain. Raw. Desperate. Utterly alone. Her heart clenched without warning. In that moment, she understood something that changed everything. Valen wasn't just fighting his wolf for dominance. He was fighting for his very sanity. As the truth unraveled in her mind, Elowen made her choice. Pack law meant nothing if there was no pack left to protect. The massive oak doors loomed before her, scarred by claws and reinforced with iron bands that spoke of desperate attempts to contain the beast within. Her hand touched the ancient handle. Everything was about to change forever. Chapter 5: Breaking Sacred Law. The metal handle burned cold against Elowen's palm as she turned it slowly, her heart hammering a rhythm that seemed to echo through the ancient stone walls. No turning back now. The door opened with a whisper of hinges that had witnessed centuries of pack secrets, revealing a chamber bathed in silver moonlight and deep shadows. For a heartbeat, everything was perfectly silent. Even so, she could feel the weight of predatory eyes watching her from the darkness. "You shouldn't be here." The voice emerged from the far side of the room, rough, strained, barely recognizable as human. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw him standing near massive windows that overlooked their threatened territory. Valen Blackwood was magnificent even in his torment. Tall, powerfully built, with midnight black hair falling across shoulders, rigid with barely contained violence. Between them, something crackled like lightning in the charged air. "Alpha," she began, stepping fully into the chamber despite every instinct screaming at her to flee. "I bring critical intelligence about— Get out!" The words came as a low growl that raised every hair on her arms. "Before I lose what little control I have left." Rather than retreating, she moved closer with newfound determination. Her wolf surged forward with an intensity that stole her breath completely. What was happening to her? "3 packs move against us," she said urgently. "Caius Thornfield leads them, and they know about your condition. Dawn brings war, and they're counting on you being unable to lead our defense." As if pulled by invisible strings, Valen turned toward her slowly. Moonlight revealed his face, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw clenched with tremendous effort, and eyes that blazed gold with barely contained wildness. When their eyes locked, her world tilted on its axis. Her wolf didn't just stir, it sang with pure recognition. "Impossible," he breathed, taking a step toward her before catching himself. But your wolf is dormant. I know." Her voice trembled as something deep inside began to awaken. "But not tonight. Tonight everything's different." The space between them burned with recognition neither could explain or deny. As the silence stretched like a taut wire, she felt it building. A connection that defied logic, defied pack law, defied everything she thought she knew about herself. "We have 90 minutes, she whispered. 90 minutes to save our pack." His blazing eyes never left hers. "Then we'd better get started." Chapter 6: Into the Lion's Den. The chamber door closed behind Elowen with the finality of a tomb sealing shut, trapping her alone with the most dangerous alpha alive. For the first time in 3 days, Valen's wolf went completely still. Not the violence-edged stillness of a predator preparing to strike, but something else entirely. Recognition that shook him to his core. "Show me," he said, his voice rougher than she remembered from pack meetings. As the wind shifted outside, carrying the scent of approaching dawn, she spread her hand-drawn intelligence maps across his massive oak desk. "Here." Her finger traced enemy positions with practiced precision. Caius has divided his forces into 3 coordinated waves. The first hits our eastern gate at sunrise, purely a distraction. The real assault comes from the north, where our defenses are weakest. Even as she spoke, she became acutely aware of Valen beside her. His scent, cedar and steel and something purely, overwhelmingly masculine, seemed to wrap around her like a physical caress. Her wolf purred in response, a sound she'd never heard from herself before. "Clever strategy," he murmured, studying the tactical layout with razor-sharp focus. He's counting on us focusing on the obvious threat while his main force breaches the northern wall and strikes directly at the pack house. She finished his thought without thinking, then froze completely. How had she known what he was going to say? Because of that moment of perfect synchronization, something fundamental shifted between them. Valen's golden eyes met hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Your wolf," he said carefully, as though approaching a skittish animal. When did it start responding like this? Truth be told, she'd been wondering the exact same thing. Tonight, the moment I saw those enemy forces, something inside me woke up completely. What followed was a silence charged with dangerous possibility. Her body moved on pure instinct, stepping closer to the map, closer to him. The air thickened between them until breathing became a conscious effort. "We need to coordinate our pack's defense," she managed, though her voice sounded breathless even to her own ears. "Position our strongest fighters where they can inflict maximum damage." Valen nodded, but his attention seemed split between the tactical situation and something else entirely. Without warning, his hand brushed hers as they both reached for the same section of map. Fire bloomed beneath her skin at the innocent contact. Her wolf answered with a howl of pure recognition. Valen's eyes blazed gold as his wolf surged forward to meet hers. In the quiet that followed, one truth became crystal clear. Whatever was happening between them was far more dangerous than any enemy army. But they had a pack to save first. Chapter 7. Unexpected Reactions. Valen's wolf should have torn the intruder apart the moment she crossed his threshold. Instead, the beast had gone silent for the first time in days, settling into watchful stillness that felt more like anticipation than aggression. As a result, Valen found himself studying a Lowenthorn with completely new eyes. "Your intelligence network," he said, forcing himself to focus on tactical concerns, rather than the way moonlight caught auburn highlights in her dark hair. "How do you know Caius's plans in such precise detail?" Her smile was sharp as a blade's edge. "Because I've been watching them for weeks, following their scouts, learning their patrol patterns." She traced another route on the map with confident strokes. 3 nights ago, I infiltrated their main camp directly. The casual way she mentioned infiltrating enemy territory made his alpha instinct surge with protective fury. Meanwhile, his wolf radiated something entirely different: pride, satisfaction, as though her courage pleased it on some primal level. "That was incredibly dangerous," he said quietly. "Necessary," she corrected, green eyes flashing with determination. "Our pack's survival depended on accurate intelligence, and I was the only one positioned to gather it." Which meant she'd risked her life for information that might save them all. Her father had trained her well, perhaps too well for Valen's peace of mind. As if the forest watched their every move, another howl echoed in the distance. Enemy scouts testing their borders. The attack was imminent. "We need to position our archers here," Elowen continued, pointing to a ridge overlooking the northern approach. "And here as well. If we can create overlapping fields of fire, they'll be trapped in a killing field." Valen's tactical mind engaged fully. "Brilliant strategy, but we'll need every available fighter to make it work effectively." Her wolf pressed forward suddenly, and she swayed slightly on her feet. The emergence of dormant abilities was clearly taking a physical toll. Without thinking, Valen steadied her with a hand on her elbow. The moment their skin touched, electricity raced up his arm like wildfire. Her breath caught audibly. "I'm fine," she whispered, but made no move to pull away from his supportive touch. The space between them burned with dangerous potential. Her scent, wildflowers and steel and something uniquely, intoxicatingly her, filled his lungs with each breath. And just like that, everything changed fundamentally. His wolf's silence finally made perfect sense. The beast wasn't waiting to attack. It was waiting to claim its mate. Chapter 8. Working through the nighttime became fluid as they worked side by side, the approaching dawn serving as both enemy and ally in their desperate race against annihilation. Maps covered every surface of Valen's chamber, marked with defensive positions, patrol routes, and contingency plans that might mean the difference between survival and slaughter. Yet despite their tactical focus, Eowyn found herself increasingly aware of the powerful man beside her. "If we position crossbowmen here," she said, leaning over the central table to mark another strategic spot, "they can provide covering fire for our retreating scouts." Valen moved to study her suggestion, bringing him close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body like a furnace. Her newly awakened wolf purred in response, a vibration she felt deep in her bones. "Your father taught you exceptionally well," he murmured, his voice carrying a note of genuine admiration that sent heat spiraling through her chest. That night, memories of her childhood surfaced unbidden. Countless hours spent learning to read terrain, to anticipate enemy movements, to think 3 steps ahead of any opponent, skills that might save their pack from complete destruction. "He always said intelligence was the only weapon that never ran out of ammunition," she replied softly. Come morning, those hard-learned lessons would face their ultimate test. The thought made her chest ache with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. As if summoned by her swirling emotions, Valen's attention shifted from the tactical maps to her face. "You're exhausted," he observed with concern. "When did you last sleep properly?" The question made her realize she'd been running on pure adrenaline and determination for nearly 2 days straight. But then his hand touched her shoulder, a gentle, supportive gesture that made her wolf sing with contentment. "Sleep is for after we achieve victory," she said, though her voice betrayed the weariness she was fighting to hide. What followed was a moment of perfect understanding. They were both warriors, both willing to sacrifice everything for their pack's survival and future. "There's something else," she admitted, meeting his intense golden gaze directly. "Something I haven't told you about Caius's true forces." His expression grew deadly serious. "What?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They're not just here to conquer territory or claim resources. They're here to eliminate our bloodline entirely. I heard Caius talking about ensuring no Shadowridge wolf ever rises again." The implications hung between them like a physical weight pressing down on their souls. Genocide. And they had less than 30 minutes to prevent it. Chapter 9. Dawn approaches. The first pale fingers of dawn crept across the horizon as Eowyn and Valen completed their final defensive preparations, their shared urgency creating an almost tangible tension in the chamber. Enemy howls echoed closer now, testing calls meant to gauge their readiness and probe for weaknesses. Soon after, the real assault would begin, and everything they'd planned would face the ultimate trial by fire. "Our fighters are in position," Valen confirmed, his voice tight with controlled tension. "But I should be leading them from the front lines, not trapped in here with me," Eowyn finished quietly. The guilt in her voice was unmistakable. Rather than denying her words, he turned to face her fully. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." As the silence stretched between them, her wolf stirred restlessly. Something was building, a pressure that seemed to come from within her very bones. Her body moved on instinct, swaying slightly toward him. "Valen?" she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. His eyes blazed gold in response. "I feel it too," he said roughly. "Whatever this is between us, it's not going away." The moment their eyes locked, her world shifted on its axis. Everything else, the approaching battle, the enemy forces, even their pack's desperate situation, faded into background noise. With every heartbeat, the connection between them grew stronger. Her wolf pressed forward eagerly, recognizing something essential in his powerful presence. Without warning, Valen stepped closer. "Elowen," he said, her name a rough caress on his lips. "Tell me to stop." Instead of speaking, she closed the remaining distance between them. As fire bloomed beneath her skin at their proximity, she realized the truth that would change everything. Her wolf hadn't just awakened, it had found its mate. "The battle," she managed to say, though her voice trembled with want, "will happen with or without us," he replied, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "But this might be our only chance." As the first enemy war cries echoed across their territory, Valen's wolf surged forward to claim what was his, and Elowen's awakened wolf rose to meet him with a song of recognition that shook the very foundations of their world. Dawn had arrived, and with it their destiny. Chapter 10. The Shadowborn Truth. Silver light exploded behind Elowen's eyes as ancient memories that weren't her own flooded through her consciousness like a dam bursting. She saw herself as a child, but not as she remembered. In these visions, her eyes glowed with ethereal silver fire while shadows bent to her will like living creatures. Her grandmother's voice echoed across time itself. "Hide it, child. Hide what you are until the moon calls you home." "What's happening to me?" Elowen gasped, her body convulsing as power she'd never felt before surged through her veins like molten starlight. Valen's arms tightened around her protectively. "Your bloodline is awakening," he said with sudden understanding. "You're not just any wolf, Elowen. You're Shadowborn." The word hit her like a physical blow. Shadowborn, the legendary bloodline that could walk between worlds, command darkness itself, and balance an alpha's raw power with supernatural grace. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The Shadowborn died out centuries ago." "Apparently not," Valen replied grimly. As if summoned by her transformation, shadows in the chamber began moving independently of any light source. "Your grandmother must have hidden your heritage to protect you." Because of that revelation, everything made perfect sense. Her father's secretive training, her mother's mysterious death, the way other wolves had always seemed wary around her despite her supposedly dormant abilities. More importantly, it explained why Valen's wolf had recognized her instantly. Alpha wolves were instinctively drawn to Shadowborn mates because together they created an unbreakable supernatural bond. "The enemy knows," she realized with growing horror. "That's why they're attacking now. They discovered what I am and want to eliminate the threat before you fully manifest your powers," Valen finished darkly. What followed was a moment of crystalline clarity. Her entire life had been leading to this moment. Not just meeting Valen, but becoming what she was always meant to be. As the truth unraveled around them, silver fire danced along her skin while shadows responded to her emotional state. The dormant wolf hadn't been weak or defective. It had been waiting for the right moment to emerge. "Show me," she whispered to the power building inside her. "Show me what I truly am." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Silver light erupted from her skin as her Shadowborn nature fully awakened, and the chamber filled with dancing shadows that moved like liquid starlight. In that moment, Elowen Thorne ceased to exist. The Shadowborn had returned. Chapter 11. The Alpha's Search. The revelation of Elowen's true nature triggered something primal in Valen's memory. Fragments of dreams and instincts he'd dismissed as alpha paranoia for months. "I've been hunting for you," he admitted roughly, his voice thick with emotions he couldn't fully name. "My wolf has been driving me insane, searching every corner of our territory for something I couldn't identify." Even so, the pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. His increasing instability, the violent mood swings, the way his wolf had grown more agitated with each passing day. "The night terrors," he continued, pacing the chamber like a caged predator. "Dreams of silver eyes and shadow-touched skin. I thought I was losing my sanity." Yet his wolf had known exactly what it was seeking. The beast had sensed its shadow-born mate nearby, driving its human half to the brink of madness with frustrated need. "How long?" Elowen asked softly, shadows still dancing around her transformed form. 3 months, Valen replied. "It started as restlessness, then escalated to the violent episodes you witnessed. My wolf was trying to force me to find you by any means necessary. What's worse, he'd fought against those instincts instead of following them. His rational mind had dismissed the supernatural compulsion as stress from leadership responsibilities. As a result, both he and Elowen had suffered unnecessarily, him from the torment of an incomplete bond, her from a lifetime of suppressed power. The bond was already forming, she realized with wonder. Even before we met face to face, our wolves were calling to each other. That night, everything made perfect sense. The inexplicable pull he'd felt toward the intelligence division, his insistence on reading every report Elowen filed, the way he'd found excuses to be near her during pack gatherings. "My wolf knew you belonged to us," he said simply. Between them, something crackled like electricity given form. The mate bond that had been building for months was finally free to manifest fully. "All this time," Elowen whispered, "I thought something was wrong with me, but I was just waiting for you to find me." As if fate demanded it, Valen stepped closer to her transformed figure. Silver light and shadow seemed to recognize his presence, reaching out like living things to caress his skin. His wolf surged forward with a roar of pure satisfaction. Finally, they were complete. The search was over. The claiming could begin. Chapter 12. Destiny Revealed. The chamber filled with supernatural energy as two ancient bloodlines recognized each other across the barriers of time and space itself. Silver fire met golden lightning as Elowen's shadowborn nature fully merged with Valen's alpha power, creating something that had been prophesied but never witnessed in living memory. "This isn't coincidence," she breathed, understanding flooding through her like divine revelation. "Our meeting, the timing of the attack, even my assignments and intelligence, it was all orchestrated." What followed was the most profound realization of her existence. Every choice that had led her to this moment had been guided by forces beyond mortal comprehension. "The moon goddess herself arranged this," Valen said with absolute certainty. His eyes blazed with supernatural fire as ancient knowledge surfaced in his consciousness. A shadowborn and an alpha, bonded during a time of greatest need. Rather than feeling manipulated, Elowen felt a deep sense of rightness settle in her bones. This was always meant to happen, not just for their personal happiness, but for the survival of all wolfkind. "The prophecy," she whispered, memories that weren't hers flooding through the mate bond. "When shadow meets light in the hour of greatest darkness, the ancient power shall rise again." Because of that revelation, everything clicked into place with perfect clarity. Their packs hadn't just been under attack. They'd been facing the opening moves of a supernatural war that threatened to destroy the werewolf world entirely. As if summoned by her understanding, the mate bond between them solidified with a pulse of pure power that shook the fortress foundations. Silver and gold light swirled around them like living aurora. "We're not just mates," Valen realized with growing awe. "We're weapons forged by destiny itself." The air thickened as their combined power reached levels that should have been impossible. Shadows and light danced together in perfect harmony while their wolves sang with recognition that transcended physical existence. In the quiet that followed, one truth became absolutely clear. Their love wasn't just personal destiny. It was the key to saving their world. "Together," Elowen said, her voice carrying harmonics of both silver and gold. "Forever," Valen replied, their bond sealing with supernatural finality. As the first sounds of enemy assault reached their chamber, the newly bonded pair prepared to face their destiny head-on. The prophecy had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 13. The Bond Awakens fire raced through Aloan's veins as the mate bond surged to life between them, a connection so intense it stole the breath from her lungs. Her consciousness expanded suddenly, filling with Valen's thoughts, emotions, and sensations, until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. The psychic link was overwhelming, raw, primal, absolutely consuming. "I can feel everything you feel," she gasped, her body trembling with the force of their supernatural connection. "Your wolf, your thoughts, even your heartbeat." Meanwhile, Valen's control shattered completely. The mate bond demanded completion with an urgency that made rational thought nearly impossible. His wolf surged forward, gold eyes blazing with possessive hunger. "You're mine," he growled, the words carrying harmonics of both man and beast. "Every breath, every heartbeat, every shadow that dances around you. Mine." What followed was the most dangerous moment of either of their lives. Because of the bond's intensity, their wolves began pushing for immediate claiming despite the tactical situation. Not only that, but their combined power levels were becoming unstable. Silver fire and golden lightning crackled between them while shadows writhed across the chamber walls like living things. "We have to stop," Elowen whispered, even as her body betrayed her by swaying closer to his overwhelming presence. "The battle means nothing if I don't claim you," Valen interrupted roughly. His hands framed her face with desperate gentleness. "The bond won't be denied much longer." As if summoned by their mounting desperation, the first sounds of enemy war cries echoed across their territory. Dawn had broken, and Caius's forces were beginning their assault. Yet neither could force themselves to step apart. "Choose," Valen's wolf demanded through their psychic link. "Pack or mate, duty or destiny. You cannot have both." The ultimatum hit like a physical blow. Truth be told, she'd always known this moment would come, when her loyalty to the pack would conflict with her deepest desires. Still, as enemy howls grew closer and her body sang with need for completion, Elowen realized something that changed everything. Maybe they didn't have to choose. Maybe the bond itself was the weapon they needed. "Together," she whispered, her decision made. "We face this together. Or not at all." As their wolves roared approval, the mate bond pulsed with dangerous promise. The point of no return had arrived. Chapter 14. Enemy at the Gates. The fortress shook as enemy forces crashed against Shadow Ridge's outer defenses like a supernatural tsunami designed to destroy everything in its path. Beta Marcus's voice crackled through the communication crystal, desperation evident in every word. "Alpha, the eastern gate is failing. We need you leading the—" The crystal went silent as another earth-shaking explosion rocked the ancient walls. "I have to go," Valen said, though every line of his body screamed protest at the thought of leaving his unclaimed mate. "My pack needs their alpha." Rather than releasing him, Elowen stepped closer, her newly awakened Shadowborn abilities responding to the crisis. "Your pack needs both of us," she corrected firmly. As the wind shifted outside their chamber, carrying the scent of blood and battle smoke, they faced an impossible choice. Complete their mating bond and risk their pack's destruction, or separate now and potentially lose each other forever. "The claiming ritual takes hours," Valen said roughly. "Hours we don't have while our people die." Yet even as he spoke, his wolf fought against every instinct to leave her unprotected. The beast had waited months to find its mate. It wouldn't be denied now. What's worse, the incomplete bond was making them both unstable. Power surged unpredictably through their connection, threatening to tear apart everything around them. "There has to be another way," Elowen insisted, though uncertainty crept into her voice. Before either could answer, another communication crystal flared to life with urgent red light. This time, it was Guardian Captain Torres from the northern wall. "Alpha Blackwood, they're using shadow magic against us. Our defenses are useless." The transmission cut off abruptly. Shadow magic. Caius had brought supernatural weapons specifically designed to counter their normal defenses. Without warning, the strategic implications became crystal clear. "He knows," Elowen breathed. "He knows about my shadow-born nature and came prepared." As if fate demanded it, enemy howls rose in triumph from the direction of the northern breach. Their conventional defenses were failing faster than anyone had anticipated. "They're not just trying to conquer us," Valen realized with growing horror. "They're trying to prevent our bond from completing." The choice was no longer between duty and destiny. It was between immediate action and total annihilation. "Now," Elowen said with sudden fierce determination. "We do this now, or lose everything forever." As enemy forces poured through their breached defenses, the mate bond between them pulsed with desperate urgency. Time had run out. The claiming had to begin. Chapter 15. The Claiming Begins. Silver fire erupted around them as Valen's mouth crashed against Elowen's with desperate hunger, the mate bond finally given permission to claim what had always belonged to it. The moment their lips touched, power exploded through the chamber with enough force to crack the ancient stone walls. Not only that, but their psychic connection deepened until their very souls began merging together. "Mine," Valen growled against her mouth, his wolf surging forward to brand her with his scent and presence. "Always mine." Yet even as supernatural ecstasy threatened to consume them completely, the sounds of battle raged closer. Enemy forces had breached the main courtyard, and their pack was fighting for survival without their alpha's leadership. "The bond," Elowen gasped between desperate kisses. "It's not just claiming, it's amplifying our power." What followed was a revelation that changed everything. As their mating progressed, their combined abilities weren't just adding together, they were multiplying exponentially. Meanwhile, shadows responded to her emotional state by forming protective barriers around the chamber, while Valen's alpha dominance extended far beyond normal limits through their psychic link. "I can feel every member of our pack," he said with amazement. "Their locations, their injuries, their fear, everything." Because of their supernatural connection, they could coordinate the entire battle from their chamber without physically being present on the battlefield. "We don't have to choose," Elowen realized with sudden clarity. "The mate bond isn't making us abandon our duty, it's making us stronger guardians." As if summoned by her understanding, silver fire began flowing through their psychic link to reach every Shadow Ridge warrior. Their pack members suddenly moved with enhanced speed, strength, and coordination. Rather than weakening their defenses, the claiming was transforming their entire force into something unprecedented. "Together," Valen commanded through their bond, his voice reaching every corner of their territory. "Drive them back!" What's worse for their enemies, the mate bond was only beginning to manifest its true power. As their claiming deepened, reality itself seemed to bend around their combined will. Still, completion would require total vulnerability at the moment of greatest danger. "Trust me," Elowen whispered as enemy war cries echoed directly below their window. As their souls prepared to merge completely, the final phase of claiming began, just as enemy forces breached the tower itself. The timing couldn't be more dangerous, or more perfect. Chapter 16. Loss of Control. The mating bond erupted like a supernatural volcano, tearing through both of them with a violence that shattered every window in the chamber. Valen's human consciousness shredded as his wolf broke free completely, the massive silver-black beast emerging in a transformation so violent it cracked the stone floor beneath him. His eyes blazed pure gold, no humanity left, only primal claiming instinct. "Valen!" Elowen screamed, but her own control was disintegrating just as catastrophically. Silver fire exploded from her skin as her shadowborn nature awakened with deadly force. Shadows writhed around the chamber like living serpents while power surged through her in waves that threatened to tear her apart from the inside. What followed was chaos beyond imagination. Their combined supernatural energies created a feedback loop that sent destructive pulses throughout the fortress. Ancient stones began crumbling while windows exploded in showers of crystalline fragments. Meanwhile, the mate bond pulled at them with such intensity that rational thought became impossible. Every instinct screamed for completion, even as their bodies struggled to contain power levels that should have been lethal. "Too much," she gasped, silver fire streaming from her eyes like molten starlight. "The power is too much." Rather than responding with words, Valen's wolf lunged toward her with claiming hunger that bordered on violence. The beast recognized only one truth: she was his, and nothing would prevent the bond's completion. Not only that, but their loss of control was affecting the entire pack through their supernatural connection. Every Shadow Ridge wolf suddenly felt their alpha's feral state, creating panic and confusion at the worst possible moment. As if summoned by their chaos, enemy war cries rose in triumph from the courtyard below. Caius had timed his assault perfectly. Their pack's leaders were incapacitated by forces beyond anyone's control. "Stop!" Elowen tried to command her raging power, but the Shadowborn nature had its own agenda. Centuries of suppressed energy poured out of her like a dam bursting. Between them, something cracked. Not just in the physical world, but in reality itself. Their combined power was reshaping the very fabric of existence around them. The mating bond had become a weapon of mutual destruction, and they were powerless to stop it. Chapter 17. The Pack Under Siege Beta. Marcus pressed his back against the crumbling fortress wall as enemy claws raked the air inches from his throat, his alpha's absence a gaping wound in their defensive coordination. "Fall back to the inner courtyard," he shouted over the sounds of supernatural warfare. "Form defensive lines!" Yet without Valen's tactical leadership and alpha dominance, their pack fought like scattered individuals rather than a coordinated force. What's worse, every warrior could feel their leader's feral state through the pack bond, a constant distraction that made focused combat nearly impossible. "Where is our alpha?" Warrior Thane demanded, his sword dripping with enemy blood. "We need him now." Before Marcus could answer, another wave of shadow magic crashed against their position. Caius had brought supernatural weapons specifically designed to counter normal werewolf defenses, and their conventional tactics were proving useless. "The northern wall has fallen," Scout Captain Lyra reported, her voice tight with desperation. "They're pouring through in overwhelming numbers." Meanwhile, the fortress itself seemed to be coming apart. Mysterious power surges from the Alpha's tower were causing structural damage throughout the ancient stronghold. Stones cracked, walls shifted, and the very foundations groaned under supernatural stress. As a result, their defensive positions were becoming untenable even without enemy pressure. The building that had protected them for centuries was turning into a death trap. "Something's wrong with the Alpha," Marcus realized with growing horror. Through the pack bond, he could sense Valen's consciousness fragmenting into pure animal instinct. The mating bond, it's destroying him. Not only that, but similar chaos radiated from Elowen's presence. Her awakening Shadowborn nature was creating power fluctuations that threatened every living thing in the fortress. "We're on our own," he announced grimly to the assembled warriors. "Whatever's happening in that tower, our leaders can't help us now." What followed was the darkest moment in Shadow Ridge history. Their pack faced annihilation, while their alpha and his mate struggled with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Enemy forces sensed the weakness immediately. Caius's triumphant howl echoed across the battlefield as his warriors pressed their advantage with renewed fury. "Kill them all," the enemy alpha commanded. "Leave none alive to carry tales of this victory." As supernatural fire rained down from above and enemy claws found their mark, the pack faced a terrible truth. They were losing, and without divine intervention, they would all be dead before the sun reached its zenith. Chapter 18. All seems lost. The fortress walls crumbled like ancient dreams as enemy forces poured through every breach, their victory cries echoing across a battlefield littered with Shadow Ridge casualties. In the Alpha's tower, Valen and Elowen writhed in supernatural agony as their mating bond tore them apart from the inside. Power levels that should have united them instead created a feedback loop of destruction that threatened to consume everything they'd sworn to protect. "I can't control it," Elowen sobbed, silver fire streaming from her skin in waves that melted stone. "The shadow-born power. It wants to destroy everything." Meanwhile, Valen's wolf had descended into complete madness. The massive beast prowled the chamber with predatory hunger, recognizing nothing but the need to claim its mate regardless of consequences. What's worse, their combined chaos was affecting reality itself. Space warped around them while time seemed to stutter and skip like a broken record. The laws of physics bent until the chamber existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As if summoned by their destruction, Caius's voice boomed through a communication crystal that had somehow survived the supernatural storm. "Surrender now, and I'll grant your pack a quick death," the enemy Alpha taunted. "Continue this pathetic resistance, and I'll make their suffering last for days." The words hit like physical blows. Through their fragmenting connection, they could sense their pack's desperate situation. Warriors fell one by one, while Beta Marcus coordinated a hopeless last stand. "We did this," Valen managed to say during a brief moment of clarity. "Our selfish desire for completion is killing everyone we swore to protect." Rather than offering comfort, the truth made everything worse. Their love, the bond they'd believed was destined, had become the instrument of their pack's destruction. Not only that, but the mating process showed no signs of stabilizing. If anything, their power levels continued escalating toward some catastrophic breaking point. "Maybe Caius was right," Elowen whispered in despair. "Maybe some bloodlines are too dangerous to survive." As enemy howls of triumph grew closer, and their own supernatural natures threatened to tear apart the world itself, both faced the same terrible realization. They had failed completely. Their love story wouldn't end in triumph, but in the annihilation of everything they held dear. The darkness closed in from all sides, and for the first time since their bond began forming, neither could see any path to victory. All seemed lost. Chapter 19. Power United. In the moment when all seemed lost, Elowen's consciousness expanded beyond the physical realm as her grandmother's spirit whispered across dimensions. "Shadow serves light, child. Light guides shadow. Balance is the key to true power." The revelation struck like lightning through her chaotic thoughts. Instead of fighting the overwhelming force of their mating bond, she needed to surrender to it completely, but with purpose, not fear. "Valen!" she called to the massive wolf whose golden eyes blazed with feral hunger. "We're creating chaos because we're fighting the bond instead of directing it." His wolf's ears flicked toward her voice, and beneath the animal instinct, she glimpsed the tactical mind that had built an empire. Recognition flared in those blazing depths. What followed was the most dangerous leap of faith either had ever taken. Rather than resisting the supernatural forces tearing them apart, they embraced the bond with complete surrender. The transformation was instantaneous and breathtaking. Silver fire didn't clash with golden lightning. It danced in perfect harmony. Shadows didn't writhe in destructive chaos. They flowed like liquid starlight responding to their unified will. Their combined power didn't destroy. It created. "I can see the entire battlefield," Valen gasped as his human consciousness merged seamlessly with his wolf's supernatural awareness. Through their psychic link, every corner of their territory spread before them like a living, tactical map. More importantly, their abilities weren't just combining, they were exponentially amplifying each other. Elowen's shadowborn nature allowed her consciousness to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, while Valen's alpha dominance extended through their bond to reach every pack member. "The Northern Breach," she said, her awareness splitting across dimensions. "I can seal it with shadow barriers that bend space itself." Meanwhile, Valen's tactical genius expanded to encompass impossible levels of battlefield coordination. "Marcus, Position 7, Flank Protection. Thane, Eastern Assault, Use the rubble for cover. Lyra, aerial reconnaissance, report enemy reinforcements. Because of their supernatural synchronization, the tide of battle shifted immediately. Shadow Ridge warriors moved with precision that defied normal limitations, while enemy forces found themselves fighting opponents who seemed to anticipate every move. As if summoned by their unified purpose, reality itself began responding to their combined will. Crumbling fortress walls reformed stronger than ever, while protective barriers materialized wherever their pack needed them most. "Together," Elowyn whispered, her voice carrying harmonics of silver and gold that resonated through dimensions. "Always," Valen replied, their bond finally complete and perfectly balanced. The mating bond hadn't been their weakness. It had been their ultimate weapon waiting to be properly wielded. Chapter 20. The tide turns through their unprecedented psychic connection. Valen and Elowyn became a supernatural command center that transformed their desperate last stand into a coordinated masterpiece of warfare. "Enemy reinforcements approaching from the east," Elowyn reported, her consciousness existing simultaneously in the chamber and on the battlefield. 47 warriors, shadow magic users among them. Rather than panic, Valen's response came with tactical precision enhanced by supernatural awareness. Redirecting 3rd Squadron to intercept. Lyra, use the high towers for archer support. Marcus, prepare for magical countermeasures. What followed was warfare unlike anything seen in werewolf history. Their combined abilities created tactical advantages that bordered on precognition. Elowyn's shadowborn nature revealing enemy movements before they happened, while Valen's alpha dominance coordinated responses with impossible speed. Not only that, but their power was directly enhancing every Shadow Ridge warrior. Through the mate bond, silver fire flowed to strengthen their pack members, while golden lightning accelerated their reflexes beyond normal limits. "The western flank is collapsing," Beta Marcus reported through their psychic link. "No, it isn't," Elowyn replied calmly. Shadows erupted from the ground itself, creating barriers that trapped enemy forces in killing fields designed by Valen's tactical genius. Meanwhile, their supernatural coordination was having devastating effects on enemy morale. Caius's forces found themselves constantly outmaneuvered by opponents who seemed to read their minds. "Impossible!" the enemy Alpha roared as another carefully planned assault crumbled into chaos. "How are they anticipating every move?" Because of their bond, Valen and Elowyn weren't just coordinating defense, they were rewriting the rules of supernatural warfare. Space bent around their will while time seemed to slow wherever they needed tactical advantages. "Focus fire on their shadowcasters," Valen commanded, his awareness encompassing hundreds of individual combat situations simultaneously. "Elowyn, can you disrupt their magical coordination?" "Already done," she replied, her shadowborn abilities turning enemy magic against itself. Dark spells meant to breach their defenses instead created protective barriers around Shadow Ridge warriors. As if fate demanded their victory, even the fortress itself began responding to their combined will. Ancient stones rearranged into optimal defensive positions while hidden passages opened to allow tactical repositioning. "They're not just winning," Scout Captain Torres reported with awe. "They're dismantling the entire enemy force like a precision instrument. The tide hadn't just turned. It had become a supernatural tsunami that would reshape the balance of power across all werewolf territories." Enemy forces that had seemed overwhelming now faced the unstoppable force of perfectly unified mates wielding powers that complemented each other with divine precision. Victory was no longer in question. Only the magnitude of their triumph remained to be determined. Chapter 21. Victory Through Unity. The final assault came with the fury of a supernatural hurricane, as Caius himself led his remaining elite warriors in a desperate charge toward the Alpha's tower. "Kill them!" the enemy Alpha roared, his own power blazing with desperate fury. "End this before their bond grows stronger." Yet his desperation only highlighted the hopelessness of his position. Through their perfect psychic connection, Valen and Elowyn had transformed from individual warriors into a singular force of nature, that reshaped reality itself. "He's targeting our bond," Elowen observed, her consciousness tracking Caius's approach through multiple dimensions simultaneously. "He knows that's the source of our power." Rather than seeing this as a threat, Valen's tactical mind recognized the opportunity. "Then, let's give him exactly what he wants, a direct confrontation with our unified strength." What followed was the most spectacular display of supernatural warfare in werewolf history. Caius burst into their chamber expecting to find two individuals overcome by chaotic mating energies. Instead, he faced something unprecedented, a perfectly synchronized alpha pair whose combined power had transcended normal limitations entirely. Silver fire and golden lightning didn't just fill the space, they rewrote the laws of physics around them. Shadows became solid while light took on weight and substance. Reality bent to accommodate their will. "Impossible," Caius breathed, his amber eyes wide with shock and growing fear. "You should be helpless, consumed by uncontrolled power." "We were," Elowen replied calmly, shadows flowing around her like living silk. "Until we learned that true strength comes from unity, not domination." Meanwhile, Valen's presence filled the chamber with alpha dominance so pure, it made Caius instinctively step backward. "You came here expecting to face chaos. Instead, you face destiny itself." Because of their perfect synchronization, the battle was over before it truly began. Caius's individual power, impressive though it was, couldn't compete with their unified force. More importantly, their victory sent shockwaves through every enemy warrior still fighting in the courtyard below. Through supernatural resonance, Caius's defeat was felt by his entire army simultaneously. "Surrender now!" Valen's voice boomed across the battlefield with supernatural authority. "And you'll be allowed to retreat with your lives. Continue fighting, and face the consequences of challenging destiny itself." What followed was the most complete surrender in werewolf military history. Enemy forces that had seemed unstoppable hours earlier now fled in absolute terror from opponents who had transcended normal limitations. As if summoned by their triumph, the mate bond between them pulsed with satisfied completion. They had not only saved their pack, they had established themselves as a legendary force that would reshape territorial politics for generations. "Together," Elowen whispered, silver fire dancing around their intertwined hands. "Forever," Valen replied, their bond now unbreakable and perfectly balanced. Their love hadn't just survived the ultimate test, it had become the foundation for a new era of supernatural power. The victory was complete, decisive, and absolutely transformational. The prophecy had been fulfilled through the union of shadow and light. Chapter 22. The New Alpha Pair. Sunlight streamed through the restored chamber windows as Elowen and Valen stood before their assembled pack, their mate bond now radiating the calm strength that had replaced chaotic power. The transformation in both leaders was immediately apparent to every wolf present. Valen's previous instability had been replaced by an unshakable confidence that seemed to anchor the very air around him, while Elowen's presence carried an otherworldly grace that made shadows dance in welcome. "Your alpha has found his mate," Beta Marcus announced formally, though the words were merely ceremony. Everyone could feel the completed bond through their pack connection. "Elowen Thorn, Shadowborn of the ancient bloodline, is now your alpha female." What followed was not the hesitation or political maneuvering that might have accompanied such an announcement under normal circumstances. Instead, the pack's acceptance was immediate and absolute. "She saved us all," Warrior Thane declared, dropping to one knee in a gesture of respect. "When our alpha couldn't lead us, she led him back to himself." More importantly, their combined leadership was already creating changes that strengthened the entire pack structure. Through their bond, Valen's tactical brilliance merged seamlessly with Elowen's intelligence networks, creating defensive capabilities that surpassed anything in their history. "The territorial sensors are online," Scout Captain Lyra reported. "Lady Elowen's shadow barriers now extend 3 miles beyond our borders. Nothing approaches without our knowledge. Yet the most significant change wasn't tactical but spiritual. Their mate bond created a stabilizing influence that flowed through every pack member, replacing the previous atmosphere of uncertainty with unshakable confidence. "We're not just stronger," Beta Marcus observed privately to his alpha. "We're unified in ways I've never experienced. The pack bond feels complete." As if summoned by his words, Elowen's gentle laughter filled the chamber as she worked with the younger pack members, helping them understand how their enhanced abilities functioned. Her acceptance wasn't just political, it was personal and absolute. "She was always meant to be here," an elder pack member murmured. "I can feel it in my bones. This is how things were supposed to be." Between them, Valen and Elowen had created something unprecedented. A leadership structure where strength and wisdom balanced perfectly, where alpha dominance merged with shadowborn intuition to create decisions that served everyone. The pack had not just survived their greatest threat, they had evolved into something stronger than they'd ever imagined possible. Their alpha pair wasn't just mated, they were legendary. Chapter 23: Reshaping the Territory. Word of the Shadowborn Alpha Union spread across werewolf territories like wildfire, fundamentally altering the political landscape that had remained stable for centuries. Within days of their victory, delegation after delegation arrived at Shadowridge's gates, some seeking alliance, others desperately trying to gauge the threat posed by powers they didn't understand. "The Northern Territories request formal audience," the communication crystal announced. "They wish to discuss mutual protection agreements." Elowen smiled at the diplomatic language. 3 weeks ago, they were considering joining Caius's alliance against us. Now they want our protection. Rather than gloating over their reversed circumstances, Valen approached each request with the same tactical precision that had won their recent battle. "Fear-based alliances are unstable. We need partnerships built on mutual benefit, not intimidation." What followed was a complete restructuring of territorial politics. Packs that had previously operated as isolated entities now sought the stability that came from association with proven supernatural power. "The Eastern clans have officially withdrawn their border disputes," Beta Marcus reported during their morning briefing. "They're requesting mediation for their internal conflicts instead of risking military action. More importantly, their influence was extending far beyond simple political arrangements." Other packs were beginning to understand that the Shadowborn Alpha bond represented evolution, not just individual power. "They're not just afraid of us," Elowen observed, her awareness extending through shadow networks that spanned continents. "They're realizing that supernatural bloodlines can be strengthened through proper unions rather than territorial conquest. As a result, marriage negotiations between previously hostile territories were beginning to include compatibility assessments for supernatural abilities. The werewolf world was learning that diversity of power created strength rather than division, yet not every response was positive. Intelligence reports indicated that distant territories were forming their own alliances specifically to counter what they perceived as an existential threat. "The Southern Coalition is mobilizing," Scout Captain Torres warned. "They're calling our bond an unnatural manipulation of pack hierarchy." "Let them come," Valen replied with calm confidence. "We've proven that unity creates strength they can't match through conventional alliances." As if fate demanded their continued growth, each challenge only solidified their position further. Territories that tried to resist their influence found themselves increasingly isolated, while those that embraced cooperation flourished under their guidance. The map of werewolf politics was being redrawn around the simple truth that Elowen and Valen had discovered. Properly balanced supernatural unions created power that transcended individual limitations. Their love hadn't just saved their pack, it was transforming their entire world. And they were only beginning to understand the full scope of what they'd unleashed. Chapter 24: Legendary Love. 2 years after the battle that changed everything, Elowen stood on the highest tower of Shadowridge, watching the sun set over territories that now looked to them for guidance and protection. The fortress had been rebuilt and expanded to accommodate their growing influence, but more importantly, it had become a symbol of what supernatural unity could achieve. Delegations from across the continent came to study their methods, their bond, their unprecedented success. "The younglings are asking for another story," Valen announced, joining her on the tower balcony with the easy grace that had replaced his former restless energy. "They want to hear about the night we met again." She laughed, the sound carrying harmonics of silver that made shadows dance in welcome. "Which version? The tactical briefing or the romantic legend?" "Both, apparently. They're quite thorough in their demands for accuracy." What followed was a comfortable silence as they watched their territory settle into evening routines. Patrol teams moved with confidence along borders that hadn't been challenged in months. Trade caravans traveled under their protection. Young wolves played in courtyards that had once echoed with war cries. "Do you ever regret it?" Elowen asked quietly. "The responsibility, the attention, the way everyone looks to us for answers we're still figuring out ourselves?" Rather than responding immediately, Valen considered the question with the thoughtfulness that made him such an effective leader. "I regret that it took a crisis to bring us together. But everything else? The bond, the changes, even the politics? No. This is what we were meant to build." Because of their supernatural connection, she could feel the absolute sincerity behind his words. Through their mate bond, deception was impossible. They knew each other's thoughts, fears, and dreams with perfect clarity. "The Council is requesting another demonstration of unified territorial defense," she mentioned, reviewing the day's correspondence through their psychic link. "Apparently, the Western Pacts are still skeptical about Shadowborn abilities." "Let them be skeptical," Valen replied with amusement. "Actions speak louder than political posturing." As if summoned by their conversation, a new communication crystal flared to life with urgent green light. Priority message from the Continental Alliance. "Alpha Blackwood, Lady Shadowborn." The formal greeting acknowledged both their individual titles and their unique union. "The Northern Crisis requires intervention that only your combined abilities can provide." They exchanged glances that carried entire conversations. Another territory in need. Another opportunity to prove that their bond created solutions rather than just power. "Together?" Elowen asked, though she already knew his answer. "Always," Valen confirmed, their bond pulsing with shared purpose. As they prepared to face whatever challenge awaited, both understood that their love story had become something larger than personal happiness. They were living proof that destiny and choice could align to create extraordinary change. Their legend would endure not because of the power they wielded, but because of what they'd built together. A new understanding of what supernatural unions could achieve when guided by wisdom rather than conquest. The Shadowborn and her Alpha had found each other in darkness and created light that would guide their world for generations to come.